Hello, you're watching Hornbill TV's newsroom. Reservation in India is all about reserving access to seats in government jobs, educational institutions and even legislatures to certain sections of the population. The objective of providing reservations to the scheduled castes and scheduled tribes in services is not only to give jobs to some persons belonging to these communities, it basically aims at empowering them and ensuring their participation in the decision-making process of the state. In Nagaland too, there is a policy of reservation for the 7 tribes of Eastern Nagaland and 4 other backward tribes. In the most recent assembly session that took place in August this year, Chief Minister Nipurio, who is also the Minister for Personnel and Administrative Reform, said that the Cabinet has discussed the reservation quota and that they would revisit it, but clear specification could be made only after the census was conducted. Chief Minister Nipurio told the monsoon session of the Assembly that the backward tribes reservation quota stood at 37%, 25% for the 7 tribes of Eastern Nagaland block and 12% for the 4 other backward tribes. In this regard, in the month of September this year itself, a committee known as the 5 Tribes Committee on Review of Reservation Policy, comprising of representatives from the Angami, Ao, Lotha, Rengma and Sumi, held a meeting which, according to sources, were to review the existing job reservation policy, citing changes in the state's developmental dynamics since the introduction of the BT quota in 1977. The 5 Tribes Committee on Review of Reservation Policy had, in its memorandum to the Chief Minister, sought to abolish or reform the Nagaland job reservation policy for backward tribes, which has been in effect for the past 47 years. The job reservation policy was introduced in 1977 for 7 identified backward tribes in Nagaland with 25% reservation in non-technical and non-gazetted posts. As per the government, it was based on the parameter of economic backwardness and insignificant representation in the state government establishments. Even in the latest gazette notification issued by the Nagaland Staff Selection Board over the clerical and allied services examinations on the 21st of November, out of about 220 plus seats vacant in various departments, more than 85 plus seats have been reserved automatically, making it an even greater challenge and a more fierce competition for the major tribes to get a job, with many calling the reservation system unfair. In today's newsroom, the topic is whether the existing job reservation policy in Nagaland lives up to its original principle of providing equal opportunity and representation to the 17 tribes of Nagaland in the 21st century. And to speak more on this particular topic, which is the job reservation policy of Nagaland, we've got our associate editor Alngoli, who will be joining us on this special newsroom, and we'll be speaking more about the details of what the job reservation policy in 2024 means for the people of Nagaland. First of all, good morning, sir. Thank you so much for joining me on this newsroom. Very recently, so coming to the most recent topic, very recently on the 21st of November, the NSSB or the Nagaland Staff Selection Board had taken out an advertisement for the clerical and allied services examinations, in which there were about 220 plus vacant seats available for aspirants, out of which more than 85 plus seats have been reserved. So in today's time, rather in 2024, with the existing policy, reservation policy of 1977, which has not been reviewed since 1989, and this reservation policy in Nagaland had a clear principle which stated that every 10 years it could be reviewed, but since 1989 it has not been reviewed. So in the year 2024, do you think the existing job reservation policy of 1979 or 89 is actually fair for all the 17 tribes in Nagaland, sir?
I think that more the delay in reviewing the reservation policy, the more complex and the more the problems in regard to reservation will increase, Akivi.
Yes.
I think it is something very obvious, and I believe that the many controversies and issues that are slowly emerging from the back burners of the community.
Yes.
Just like maybe 5 years ago, way back 14 and 15, I don't think the 5 tribe committee existed.
Yes.
I don't remember.
Yes.
And of course, way back in 2008, 2007, I think it was during that era that there was a lot of murmuring from the so-called advanced and major tribes about why the government continues to concede to the demands of certain sections of the community when it comes to reservation. It is not like the Lotha, Ao, Sumi, Ringmine, the Angami people, they do not, it's not like they have a strong talent pool.
Yes.
It's not like every one of them is economically empowered. It's not like all of them, they have the requisites. Their talent pool is strong enough to be able to compete in the general category without having to be troubled by people who seek reservation. There are a lot of disparities in this regard, and like I said, the more we delay, the more the government delay review, I think the problem will get messier, more complex, and God forbid, it will lead to a lot of problems beyond the whole political aspects of it, beyond the administrative aspects of it. So I think I'll go with the Chief Minister here in this regard, that notwithstanding the fact that this government continues to fail, I think some of the socio-economic aspects of the state, I think I'll agree with him in this regard that this time if we are going to go to review the reservation, then we'll have to wait for the census first. And if we can have a very clear, strong census this time, I think it will also give the government a lot of leeway for them to be able to look at the reservation away from the kind of vision they had way back in 1977 and 1978.
Yes.
And of course, in 89, the political condition of the state of Nagaland was volatile. How would you imagine yourself reviewing something as important as job reservation or the employment rates of Nagaland when you are in the middle of a political conflict?
Yes.
In the 1980s, I mean, who thought about education or reservation? Everyone was dying out on the streets. Everyone was dying in the jungles. So I don't really trust in that review. But now that the Chief Minister has spoken, I think it's a very good time for us to just revisit the policy again and then wait for the census to come in. Otherwise, I would go with the 5 tribes committee here, Akevi. And because you and I, we are also part of this community that
Yes.
have always felt sidelined, excluded, ignored by the government, that always wanted to, instead of resolving issues, appease them and keep them quiet just because you don't want to have a major problem on your hands,
Yes.
which you know that you are not able to handle. So this appeasement policy needs to be done away with. I think we all need to sit together and just look at it objectively instead of subjectively, because your indecision is going to cost a lot of future generations,
Yes.
a lot of opportunities, which otherwise would have been based on merit and skill and competence, Akive.
Yes.
But just because you're so banned on reservation, or you're so banned on freebies, you're so banned on places where your skill is not demanded, somebody else is going to suffer. So I think we really need to review this.
All right, so now that you mentioned the 5 tribes committee, in the month of September they held this meeting regarding these 5 organizations came together and they formed a committee on the review of the reservation system in Nagaland, in which in the memorandum that they had submitted to the Chief Minister, they had stated that the government should either abolish the existing reservation policy or reform the existing reservation policy. Do you believe the abolishing of the 1970 or rather 1977 reservation policy at this particular juncture would also give a new ray of hope to what reservation policy and what fairness and equality would mean to all the existing tribes in Nagaland? And or do you think reforming the whole reservation policy, taking into account the creation of all the new districts, now we are 18 districts, taking into account all that, reforming it, would you say that that would be a more correct and feasible manner? And do you believe that census, the conduction of the census is the only way to get a more streamlined reservation policy?
If your census is honest,
Yes.
if your census is stringent, and if your census is accurate, why not? And ideally, Akivi, it should have been that there should have been no reservation in an ideal world.
Yes.
There should have been no reservation in the kind of competitive environment that the 21st century has given us.
Yes.
Because I think if you go to Europe, United States, if you're looking for something free, I think you're going to be looked down upon.
Yes.
And I think there's a joke even in the United States about South Asians especially. Always coming here, you guys are always coming here looking for free quotas, reservation. And as a matter of fact, which also is not a joke, people out there, most people, they build their skills, they have industry experience, they have all the skill and competences that is required for you to fulfill the demands of a particular job or a profession or a qualification. So ideally there should not have been, but unfortunately in this real world we need reservation. I wouldn't say abolish it, I think that will be wrong because our world is not yet ready for that. Whether you are in Kohima and Dimapur, whether you are in Florida or Bangkok, reservation will always be required in some sense and in some form because not everyone in this world has the right and perfect set of educational qualifications. Not everyone have the same set of skills that the industry demands. Not every one of them have the same opportunity to be able to compete. So instead of abolishing it, why don't we just review it, study it, and make changes according to the changing demographic as we might have seen during the past 10 years. Look at the census, population, and why not? I think having an economic survey will complement the whole process actually.
Yes.
Because it's one thing to see how many people live in Dimapur and Nagaland or Trinsang or Mon,
Yes.
coming at a number, about the number of individuals there, and it's quite another to see which of them are skilled to be able to fill the employment gaps in the industry or in the government departments, in the state, district level. So why not use the census as one of the benchmarks to be able, for us to be able to identify some of the gaps in the talent pool so that we will be able to come at a fairly acceptable perspective that maybe these are the changes that we will be needing. But at the current form, the reservation policy for Nagaland is very, very skewed. It's not something that will benefit everyone. It's going to benefit only a certain section of the people.
Yes.
And it's going to put at disadvantage some of the major organizations. Like I said, it's not like our people have no unemployed people. It's not like they don't have skilled people. It's not like the Ausumi Lota and the Ringpan people, they don't need job reservation because they have all the right skills. If you have the right skills and you don't have the industry, how are you going to find a place in this world for you to be able to demonstrate your citizenry?
Yes.
How are you going to be able to fulfill your professional aspirations? How are you going to build your future? It's not like, oh, advance as it, forward as it, it's not going to work like that. So instead of abolishing it, I think we wait for the census. And why not conduct another census, in this sense an economic survey, and then you go to the major communities and you go to the backward communities, so-called backward communities, then you study the reservation, and then I think we will be able to come at a fairly considerable opinion that I think we need to do away with a little bit of this percentage for these tribes, and we need to give a little bit more percentage reservation to this community. I think that will be fair, very, very fair, because you know, just recently we were talking about a certain backward, disadvantaged tribe that is making a lot of, how do you put it, they're availing a lot of benefits
Yes.
out of the so-called reservation and quota policy. They're getting a lot of stuff. And
Yes.
if you go to their town,
It's
you
more
really,
developed.
yeah, it's more developed. It looks like the United States. I don't know. If you ever been to Kohima, Wokha, and if you ever been to Znebodo or the outskirts of Mochong town, you'll be surprised that these major tribes have very, very little.
Yes.
So why not, instead of abolishing it, study it and make it equitable?
All right, so one of the major reasons as to why the backward tribes quota, or rather the reservation policy, one of the major factors was the fact that these particular community or this particular tribe were economically backward. Now, economically backward, or the backwardness in economics, is one of the major factors as to why they were given provision of the policy of reservation. And this is a this is a bone of contention for many people, with the fact that, does this statement mean that just because this community is backward or economically backward, so does this factor mean that all people of major tribes are economically forward? Does that mean that there are no economic backward people in major tribes, and that all the economically backward people in Nagaland are only from the backward tribes? And this is a point where a lot of people have a problem, in which they state that this is not equality. So how does a system change this approach of the fact that taking economic backward in the real sense of what economically backward means? So because even in major tribes, we do see a lot of people that are economically backward but do not get the opportunity of reservation policy. Whereas on the other hand of it, the backward tribe people, some of them are economically very forward, yet they avail the benefit of reservation policy. How do we bridge this gap and make it equitable for both the sides?
This is a very complex question that will demand a very complex answer, Kiwi.
Yes.
I wish I were a social scientist for me to be able to answer all this, but it is true. I think we had a newsroom in regard to the so-called development and the various aspects of it in Nagaland. I think most people in the remote areas, they believe that we are so developed, so advanced and so forward that we don't have to worry about good roads, you know. The problem is that you come only to Kohima and Dimapur.
Yes.
You have not seen the places outside Dimapur and Kohima. You have not been to the villages of the advanced tribes. You don't know that they forget outskirts. I live in the center of the town. When it starts drilling, we don't have power for 3-4 weeks.
Yes.
And we recently had that problem too. When the wind blows, all the wires are blown down. We don't have water supply.
Yes.
And there are a lot of people in our community, forward and advanced people, who cannot afford to send their children to school.
Yes.
And these advanced people are the ones who are out there earning daily wages.
Yes.
So your problem is that you come only to Dimapur. You see only Kohima and you think, oh, you're so advanced and we're so deprived, we don't have good roads. And that is the problem, Akive.
Yes.
Everywhere. The problem started way back in '77 when the government decided to differentiate the economic groups, the communities, based on their economic conditions. So suddenly, instead of saying, you know, instead of putting it in demographic terms, like let's say like economic challenge,
Yes.
or these are communities that have low employment opportunities, we suddenly put them in aristocratic sense. We suddenly put them in social economic status. We have forward tribe, we have advanced, and now you people are the backward tribes. And suddenly you did not create a demographic that will define their spaces within the larger socio-economic scheme of things. You created a class. So suddenly it's easier for the backward tribe communities to say, hey, we are backward, so we are entitled to it. And for the forward tribes, you have to tell them, oh, you are advanced, you don't need it. Even if you don't eat, you won't die. So you just leave it and give it to us. So we created a class system even without us knowing it.
Yes.
So, even in Kohima,
Yes.
Kohima is the only nice place in Nagaland that you see. But if you once you pass Kohima and go into the villages, you will see that the Angami people, they have some of the poorest people in the land.
Yes.
There are villages that they don't have good roads. You have widows, nobody to take care of them. You have a lot of unemployed youth there. Go to Znevoto, go to Woka,
Yes.
go to Teminu, one of the youngest districts. So people, and even they know it, okay? There are a lot of people who know
Yes.
how to make hay, you know, how to benefit from the whole tax,
Yes.
advance and forward. I am forward, you know, I am backward, so give me this, give me that, I demand this. And we have allowed this to happen. So I think we need to really think about this seriously.
All right, so in the latest monsoon session of the Nagaland Legislative Assembly, NPF MLA Achumbe Mukikon had raised this particular issue of job reservation, in which he had, to the House and also to all the people in Nagaland, he had stated that the job reservation policy really needs a review, and that too at the earliest. And some of the suggestions that he had given was that rather than taking tribes as a whole, why don't you identify certain places where there is complete backwardness, and disregarding the fact of which tribe lives there, why don't you give quota to that, to the residents living in that particular area, when you take into account their living standards, their economic condition, and all the social amenities that they receive, or rather the government services that they receive, whether it's first class or whether it's a really backward class. So he had given a suggestion that when we move on to the next review of the reservation policy, I think looking at the territorial integrity of certain areas in Nagaland, the reservation should be based on which should be one of the factors. Do you believe that this is a very just suggestion, in the sense that, as you were just speaking right now, we are people that only look at Nagaland through the eyes of Dimapur and Kohima, but only we come to realize the backwardness of our people when we travel to the inner parts of Nagaland. So in this regard, don't you think this would be a very rational thing to do when when there is a review on the reservation policy?
Yeah, definitely. I think the MLA is speaking sense. He's speaking common sense.
Yes.
Recently, we were talking about the United States presidential elections.
Yes.
And when you're talking about developing a certain community or region or a town or a county, you don't look at Texans. How many Texans are there? How many Mexicans are there?
Yes.
How many blacks are there? How many whites? You don't look at it. You go to the county,
Yes.
and then you do a survey. How many families, which are the families, who are the individuals who do not have access to education?
Yes.
How many of you are earning this much in a day? And by pinpointing it, instead of pinpointing the area, they look at the individual. And I think that is how it should be done. And you mentioned it just a little while ago. There are a lot of so-called backward people who are economically up there,
Yes.
educationally up there, who do not have the kind of challenges many forward tribe people face every day.
Yes.
And I think this is a common sense. This is common sense. So I think I will agree with MLA Achumbe Mukikon here that instead of looking at Konyaks or Aos or Lothar or Sumi as a whole,
Yes.
why don't you go to their houses?
Yes.
Just pinpoint, identify only those ones who cannot or who are unable to compete in the talent pool of the state. Because hey, whether we like it or not, reservation policy will always not only be needed, it will also always be required. Because even the Naga people, we go outside seeking reservation in medical jobs, medical sector, in the industry. We seek reservation, and only because of those kind of reservation that I think we are able to compete in the talent pool of the industry, whichever it might be. So reservation policy will be, it will always be required. The only thing is, how do you implement it? Instead of looking at the tribes as a whole, as a community,
Yes.
how Manukan advance as any charity, no. go to their houses, have an economic survey. That's what I'm saying. Have an economic survey. Identify the people, the families who do not have the kind of access that forward people have in regard to education. It could be funding their dreams. It could be setting up businesses. And how many unemployed people are there, and how many of them are breadwinners. Identify the economic aspects of the individual's family, and only then I think set up programs so that we will have a clear developmental vision when it comes to reservation activity.
All right, so thank you so much for joining me on this newsroom. We seem to have run out of time, but this is another topic for another day, and hopefully when we speak about reservation policy the next time, we hope that there is a review, and the review is actually a rational one. Thank you so much, sir. Well, that was our associate editor, Almuli, who was just speaking on the existing reservation policy that is applicable to the state of Nagaland, in which our associate editor, Al, has specifically mentioned that the review is completely necessary, and the fact that Nagaland in the 21st century is still applying the reservation policy of the 1970s and the 80s, this could create a very big imbalance, and the more we delay reviewing this particular reservation policy, the more problems the government is going to face later in the coming days. Well, apart from which, reservation policy is supposed to be a policy which gives equal representation, but with the existence of a policy of the 1970s and the 80s, whether this policy actually aims to provide an equitable society to all 17 tribes in Nagaland, that is a big question. But we hope that in the days to come, the government of Nagaland would definitely review this reservation policy, and that we hope that the census, which is deemed to be conducted in the year of 2025, we hope that this problem gets a solution at the earliest. HornbillTV will bring you newsrooms on topics such like this, so keep watching HornbillTV.